Okay, why don't we get started? I just want to start off by thanking all of you for coming today to listen to the stories and the experiences of two people whom I personally admire so deeply and that just have taught me so much about myself and the world, Profe Krogh and Mr. Corman. I truly hope that today their talk will help all of you on your own paths to living with ADHD and supporting kids with ADHD. Before we get started, it would be extremely helpful if everyone here took a minute or two to fill out the survey that's in the chat. We'll repeat this quick survey at the end to see if today's event has answered your questions and augmented your understanding. Here at SFA, we're always trying to measure and quantify the impact of our programs and events to really help us figure out how to help you more effectively. So why don't we take a minute or two so you guys can fill out that survey. Again, we are so grateful for your feedback. It really helps us improve our advocacy. Yeah, so as people are filling out, why don't we take this time of if Mr. Corman and Prof. Krogh, you guys want to introduce yourselves briefly, so the audience kind of gets the chance to know who you are. So yeah, either one of you if you want to start.
Corman, why don't you go ahead?
I like how you unmute yourself just to tell me to go first. So my name is Andrew Corman. I've been teaching in the school district since 2009, teaching and working and coaching since 2001. I currently teach physics at Canyon Crest Academy, as well as the head cross country and track and field coach there as well. I am my husband. I am a father of two young little ones and a coach and a teacher. And I'm very excited about all the different things that I have.
Awesome. Well, I have been teaching in the district since 2003, 19 years in the district. I taught for 5 years at San Diego Academy. And then once the school is complete at CCA, I was transferred over to teach the AP classes. So I currently teach AP Spanish and Spanish 3. I too am a wife, a mom of little ones. I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. And so, yeah, life is busy. And I also started the PALS program at CCA. And once I had my daughter, I passed that over to Mr. Unwin. So connectivity is very, very, very important for me. And also just connecting with students and making sure that they feel safe.
Love that. So we just want to get started just by some background information. So why don't Prof, if you want to go first for this question, how did you personally come to realize that you had ADHD?
Well, as you and I have talked about before, when I was growing up, teachers would always tell my parents at back to school night or teachers conferences that I had ants in my pants. And so that was my unofficial diagnosis for years and years and years. And in my day, because I graduated in 1993, in my day, ADHD wasn't really talked about, and there wasn't a lot of information about it. And so I don't think I realized I really had it until I became a teacher and I started learning about what were kind of some characteristics of it and noticing like, wow, that's really interesting. I do that too. So I think it was when I became a teacher when I realized that, wow, because I was never officially diagnosed as a child.
Yeah. Is there a reason? Because I think you mentioned before to me that your parents also kind of recognized it. Was there like a reason you didn't get diagnosed, or was it that your parents also were kind of unaware of the whole situation?
I think my parents were more unaware when I was in, elementary school and high school. And it wasn't until like one of my younger brothers was officially diagnosed that they realized. And I also think that they saw that my energy level, which is very high, as you know, as being one of my students, that I have a lot of energy, that it was more of a gift. And they didn't want to stifle that.
Love that. I love that. So Mr. Corman, why don't we talk about how you found out you had ADHD?
I think early on, my mom taught second grade for over 30 years, and when I was born early on, she recognized that I was exhibiting ADD or ADHD at the time, and talking to my pediatrician, she tells me now that they talked about how she did not want me to be diagnosed because she didn't want me to have that label onto it at that time. And I don't say that for judgment or anything. I just say that's what happened. That's what we did. So it wasn't until college that I was had a friend who she was in the graduate counseling program, and she kind of jokingly like, "Hey, why don't you take this test? Why don't you try this out?" And doing that, scored greatly, getting ADHD, and she just kind of laughs and goes, "Yep, I knew." And I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." And it kind of same thing, going on different pathways. But when I became a teacher, really learning what those symptoms are and those modalities and what works and doesn't work, I see a lot in myself of, oh, that's why that happens, or oh, that makes sense, I do that, or oh, that works for me as well. And so it's been kind of, I haven't been officially diagnosed, but having gone through the different testings that my friend was going through, I definitely cleared all those with flying colors.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because in my own experiences, I was first like quote unquote diagnosed in third grade. But at the time, both of my parents decided not to pursue a formal diagnosis, because they were also worried about me being labeled. And so it's just very interesting that we have those kind of parallel experiences. So kind of building off of that for you, Mr. Corman, did the throughout, middle and especially high school, did you really looking back, in hindsight, did you wish you got that formal diagnosis? What were your experiences in that area?
I think my parents being aware, and with my mom's educational background, that definitely helped. I don't think I was inhibited by any way, but it did teach me a lot of discipline and control. My parents never allowed anything to be an excuse, and we found early on that if I was involved in athletics, that helped me a lot as well. And growing up and looking back and talking with my sister, we realized that, oh, family meals were always very important in my household. And as much as my sister and I grumbled about always having the dinner with my parents, we look back of that was huge. That was fantastic. And my parents really having a good breakfast, having a good lunch, having a good dinner. That I didn't see how important that was until going off to college. And I can remember when finally getting that diagnosis of, oh, well, that's why if I have ice cream with Fruity Pebbles on it after dinner, I don't get anything done for the next few hours. It's not just a sugar overload. There's actually other reasons for this. So no, I don't think there was any. It was a balancing, and it's the same things that help me now. It's a balancing of sleep. Sleep was huge I'd say growing up. It's a balancing of athletics, being involved. That was huge. It was a balancing of nutrition, and so having that and having that support of my parents and understanding how it was. I'm definitely not a case that was needing of medication. It may or may not have helped me, but at that time, I was able to control things and be fairly successful without it.
I love that. Personally, I'm also not on medication, so I totally can I feel those parallel experiences of learning to really develop non-medication based strategies to living with my ADHD. Along with this, kind of moving more into your own personal lives currently today, how does ADHD impact your work and home lives today? Especially as as teachers, parents, you have to operate in so many different responsibilities. How does ADHD impact that? If Mr. Corman, if you want to go first, we're going to be flip-flopping the order.
Hey, who's going first?
You can.
Oh, I am.
Yes.
There wasn't an ADHD moment on that one there. I think I both say both Profe and I our kids are about the same age. And I think we will probably have similar experience with this, is that and with everybody out there whose parents knows, when you have young ones, the nights are long, but the months are very short. And it's as I say, with my ADHD, it's been both a curse and a blessing. If I'm able to get to sleep, the nutrition and the exercise, I'm okay. And having two young ones around, relaxing my ADHD and just being able to multi-focus and check to see what's going on very quickly and monitoring them so they can both do the things they want to do, and yet I still feel aware of what's happening, is a great, and it's a benefit. But at the same time, if I don't have that discipline with it, I can lose track. I'm forgetful. You can for it's and so it can be tough as well too. And so I think, going right back with, the nights are long and the months are short. That's best thing.
What about you, Profe?
I think that becoming a parent made me realize that I had a lot more symptoms, I think, after having my first daughter, because mom brain and just now having to keep a human being alive, and having a lot of other things in place, sleep deprivation, just the being needed all the time has been really, really hard for me. And I've had to take many steps back and just refocus. I've had to learn how to really manage my ADHD, and I'm constantly aware of it now, constantly, because my time is so limited now that when I come to work, I have to put my head down. I have to work through lunches. I have to do everything. I have to wake up super early. I wake up at 5:30 every morning. Exercise also for me is such a big key in just keeping my head clear. And I've calculated out, I'm no math person, but if I do 30 minutes of exercise in the morning, that's 4% of my day. And just having that little bit of time that's for me, and I'm doing something for myself, getting that exercise checked off in the morning, taking care of myself, doing that makes the rest of my day go so much smoother. I'm not thinking about like, oh, I have to rush home. Oh, I've got to work out. I've got to do this. I get that done right away. And also, as Andrew mentioned, the diet is a really huge piece for me. When I was younger, my mom, really limited my amount of sugar, and I understand why, because now if I don't eat very well, I feel foggy. My brain just doesn't fire at the same capacity as it normally does when I'm eating something that's high in protein in the morning. And so I really think that diet and exercise, and my parents always made me participate in any sort of physical activity every semester. So whether it would be basketball, tennis, cheerleading, track, whatever it was, they made me choose something every single season. And I'm so grateful for that, because it really did help me just to get out the extra energy, because I have a lot of that. And even in my mid 40s, I have more energy than some people that are in their 20s. And so that is a blessing. That is a blessing, I think, especially with having a 3-year-old that I have to run it after and stuff. But sleep is really a big piece of it as well, and I don't get as much sleep as I should, and I feel it, and I feel like kind of like I get forgetful. That's what happens when I don't get enough sleep. I'm just kind of like, I feel almost like a space cadet. And so I've become a chronic list maker. I have to make lists, and I have a piece of paper next to my bed because my brain starts racing when I go to sleep, and everything has to be just on a piece of paper so that I can finally fall asleep.
Yeah, I think I personally, before bed, I have 10 minutes of journal, so I can dump all my thoughts out, so they're not bothering me before I sleep. Touching more upon blessings, I really want to, dive deeper into that, because some parents have also asked, so I know you mentioned your energy, Profe, but what other benefits do you feel like ADHD has brought you?
I think it makes me very creative. I definitely feel that I think outside of the box. I'm not like, I I'm always thinking of different solutions, and my brain races a lot, but there's a lot of really good ideas in there. And if I can just get them out on paper, I definitely am not somebody who just accepts no for an answer. I find a different way to get to where I want to be. And I think it's made me I can really persevere, because my parents were very similar to yours, Andrew, in that there were no excuses. Like, you figure it out, you find a way. And my parents didn't allow me to make any excuses. So I had to really search and figure what worked for me. And that really made me, I think, be much more resilient, more creative in how am I going to get there? Because I just knew that I would get there, but I had to find my own way and what worked for me. And so it was a lot of trial and error. I would say a lot of trial and error. And what works for me doesn't always work in every situation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think
totally.
definitely the creativity aspect of my ADHD, I wouldn't trade for anything.
100%. What about you, Mr. Cormier?
I
What are some
actually have a
lessons?
question for Profe, because and I'm going on a tangent here. I apologize.
Love it.
But do you Profe, like with lists? For me, I gotta have that notepad, and I get that idea, and I love that idea, and writing it down, and it's in writing it down, or writing down that to-do item, it's a self of accomplishment, and I feel good. But I can just remember, and this is just from this past weekend, of I lost my lists. I lost my little notepad, and just having those ideas and not being able to write it down, it was all this frustration inside of me. Does that happen to you as well?
Yes, I have one notebook that goes with me everywhere. And so I have half of it is work and half of it is personal. So the front part of it's personal, and then the other things are day by day for work. Like Tuesday, I always have 3 things that I have to get done every day. And for me, I have to cross it off with red. It's like, I don't know why I have to check it off with red. And once I do, I'm like, yes,
Well,
I feel so accomplished.
And I think you touched on a base that was a tendency for me. It's not that we're obsessive over the different criteria and the things that we do, but we know that if we do certain things and we do it in order in a certain way, we remember it and it keeps going. And I don't know what that technical term really is, but I'm that same way. For me, I love having a notebook where it's one direction is personal stuff, and then it's actually like flipped over and upside down, going from the back end of work and coaching on the other. And that just it allows me, that physical changing just helps me to separate those two and to kind of create that harmony between everything.
Yeah,
so
that makes complete sense, because I mean, I have, mine in 2 separate parts too. And sometimes there is some overlapping, and I still need them to be separate.
yes.
I love how we went off on a tangent. How there's actually a conversation here. I just want to say, love that for this. I love how we're really transitioning into every question very nicely. So we've now talked about, how you guys have used lists and notepads to really help you guys remember the things and get your energy out. So along the lines of that, how do you cope with and work around your ADHD on a day-to-day basis? Just for example, you get up, for Profe, you exercise. Mr. Coleman, you also go on runs. What are some other day-to-day things you do to really help you with your ADHD?
I think for me, it's been a transition. When I was single, living on my own, everything was kept in the same spot. There was very little change of articles of clothing. It was everything was here. Everything was organized. It was get up, run with the dog. Structure. It definitely allowed me to be free and to be thinking on other things. Now having 2 little ones, it's teaching the structure with that that can create a lot of fun and challenges with that. But it goes back to what were those roots that really helped me. And that is that physical activity. I have found for me and for my students and my athletes is doing exercising in the morning helps so much throughout the entire day. getting a good breakfast afterwards. And Profe hit the nail on the head. It's that protein in the morning. And there's a lot of literature that shows protein in the morning is extremely important. Not those high sugary cereals, but getting eggs, getting that. For me right now with my schedule, it's a protein shake that I get right after the run. And then our lunch is so early at school, I'm able to get a nice balance of good food in there. And then it's also having that, Profe mentioned three things getting done. For me, it's typically 3 to 5, but I have those 3 to 5 things I have to get done on my list. And then I got the other optional things that, okay, if I'm doing well, I get those done. If not, I can push them on to the next day. And that's perfectly fine as well. I'm not gonna panic. And it's also, I like what has helped me a lot is we've moved our cross country practices before school, which created a transition, but it's 10-15 minutes before all the students come in is sitting down, looking at that list. What must be done today? What can I try to do today? And what's going on? It's also a lot of structure within the classroom of planning out the entire semester of what's going to happen, where do we need to be, checking in with that, and then have a plan and opening the door. And just like I do with my kids, be willing to throw it all out the window because it may not work.
Absolutely. I would definitely say that I have to really make it a priority what needs to get done, because my creative side always wants, it's lurking right there. It always wants to take over. It wants to create a new game, create something new for my classroom, make something prettier in my Google Slides. And whereas like I need to grade this test. So I have to kind of associate something fun, something good with those mundane tasks so that I get them done. So for me, it's maybe going to Starbucks and getting a cup of coffee, a nice cup of coffee, so that when I'm grading that test, it doesn't feel like torture to me. Because like, I mean, I'm a teacher, but I hate grading. Like, I really don't like grading. It's not fun. I don't enjoy it. And so, but I have to do it. And so it's creating kind of like something soothing with it to make me want to do it. So that is one of the things that I do for like coping. And then when I accomplish that thing that I need to do, then I take a break and I do something. For me, music is a big part of my life. I love to listen to music, and I let myself just listen to my favorite song, or maybe I just walk around for 10 minutes and kind of tidy up my classroom, get some movement, and then I can sit back down and I can go ahead. But routine and structure, I do not do well without structure. And I think like Aaron, you having been in my class, it was always like, here's what we do. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back and we're going to continue on the second part of our lesson. But I'm also very aware of that for my students. And I want them to get up, go take a 3-minute break, use the bathroom, eat something, eat a healthy snack, eat, a slice of cheese, something that's got protein in it. That's going to help your brain to refocus again. So me, diet, movement, exercise, giving myself little breaks are essential.
Totally. In my own experiences too, I do something called blocking. And for me, blocking is really where I have all these things I like to do, scrolling on Instagram, or like, reading like a book for fun, just those kind of things that you might consider, that are not main productivity highlights. But I will block those out. Like I will set like an hour at the end of the day for myself to do that, and that's kind of how I motivate myself, right? It's because for me, it's always about sustainability. And cutting off everything you enjoy is not sustainable. That's not healthy. That doesn't make you feel good about what you're doing. And so for me, to maintain that stability, I'll block all the distractions off till the end of the day, and then just let myself indulge in it. I think, Mr. Coleman, you mentioned this, with candy sometimes. Like, it's important to let yourself indulge, to let loose once in a while, because that really helps the sustainability. And just like that, also, is so important for me in the sense that, in this day and age with social media, once you're on TikTok or Instagram, it's so easy to get lost in it. So by blocking that off until the end of the day, it helps me because I know that won't bleed into my main working times, my school time, my homework time, my, when my dinner time so yeah, I just saw that those parallels, just wanted to point that out. Yes, Mr. Corman?
Well, and I think what Profe was doing, I think she will probably agree with me, is I think once having kids, I've had to learn how to say no to things as well. It's very easy being young and dumb of going, yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll do that. Oh, that sounds exciting. I'll do that. And just spreading out. But once you really are able to focus on, okay, these are the most important items, is I can't do all those other things. And they're cool things and I love them and they're fantastic. But I've had to learn how to say no.
Agreed. And that's been a really hard piece for me. Before I had kids, I was so involved on campus. I went to everything. I did everything. I, went to homecoming, all the shows, all the games, and it was very much a big part of my life. And once I had kids, I had to say no so I could say yes to my family. And so now for me, if it's not a heck yes, it's a heck no.
Yeah, I definitely agree that too. Like as a student, especially, at CCA where there are so many various opportunities, so many clubs on campus, so many events. It is also about learning to say no to some great things, turning down this club and deciding to, spend time to sleep more, those sacrifices, I think, yeah, are really important to maintain that sustainability, like I mentioned earlier, to maintain the balance. And as Mr. Corman, I think he used the term harmony, right, to maintain all of that. So really, I guess for how do I cope with and work around that focusing on the sustainability, maintaining the practices that help long-term, growth, long-term management. Going around this, as a student with ADHD, and I really want to include this question because both of you have given me so many tips, but what are some challenges that you see in students with ADHD? What challenges do they face in your classrooms that you often see personally?
It's I think you hit the nail on the head, is that at CCA there, and a lot of the high schools and just in the San Diego, is there's a lot of different opportunities for students to take, and high school should be that time where students get to learn who they are by taking advantage of all those of a whole bunch of different opportunities. But at the same time, it can be also very overwhelming. And I think with somebody with ADHD, it gets overwhelming. That crossing that line comes very, very quickly, of what I can do this to all of a sudden, holy cow. It's like those time gnomes come in and the time goes by and then suddenly you're like, I am now overwhelmed with everything and I can't get my feet underneath me anymore. And so the challenges that I see is that it's balancing that time, balancing that rigor. And whereas you and I have talked, Aaron, the importance of your swimming, its importance of dieting. And when you showed me that, hey, this is the list that I have, I'm like, that's excellent. That's how you work with it, and creating that connection. And I've never been in Profe's classroom, but just hearing how she structures her class and what works for her and allowing the breaks and the movement going around, I find that's extremely important as well too within my class. You've been in my class, Aaron, it can be sometimes in labs, it's organized chaos. That's not the only way that I can describe it. Everybody's doing 42 different things at one time, which can be helpful. It can be guided, and it needs to be guided, and you need to have that structure. And yet at the same time, I try to still allow that creative freedom where students can kind of learn through their failures, and let's try different methods. Let's work to go through. And because I know for me, learning by failing helped out tremendously to figure out what worked and didn't work. And I needed that freedom and that structure to experiment.
Absolutely. I would have to say I'm constantly revisiting what works for me and trying to become more efficient. And for me, honestly, multitasking does not work for me. It does not work for me. I need to focus on one thing at a time. And really the hardest thing is just getting started for me, especially if I have something that's so big and so looming, which would be maybe like for a student, a project, or studying for a big cumulative exam at the end of the semester. It's just getting started. So, I mean, chunking things, creating little tasks to do to get things done. And even teaching AP Spanish. I mean, I have constantly so much stuff that I need to grade, simulated conversations that take, at least 5 minutes per student. And I have 26 students. So how do I do that? I listen to 3 conversations every morning. I listen to 3 in the afternoon. And so that way I can get it done. And it's not just like, oh, I'm going to be seated for like 5 hours doing this. Like I've had to figure out what works for me. And again, it's trial and error, constantly like, okay, well, this isn't really working for me. This is not, I'm not feeling like I'm being overly productive. And just feeling that overwhelm is sometimes very handicapping. And I don't know if that makes sense to say that, but as a verb, but it feels like almost like I get at some points paralyzed, like, oh my God, there's so much to do. Where do I even begin? And so then I go, okay, this is one strategy that I use a lot. What would I tell a student to do if they came and asked me? If they had like, well, I just don't even know where to begin. I'm so overwhelmed. Okay, let's sit down. And I pretend like I'm giving advice to somebody else and I make a list. And so it would be like me offering help to a student. And then it somehow like clears the pathway for me to kind of, it's not me that I'm doing this for, I'm telling somebody else to do it. And then it's easier to break it down into little tasks. And so that's something that I do often, is just like, what would I tell somebody else to do? What would I recommend?
You know what's so funny is I was listening on a podcast of how to help with all these different things, because I'm still kind of learning. And that was actually what Simon Sinek was saying was, hey, like, stop, look at yourself objectively. And if your friend was in that situation, what would you tell them? Tell that to yourself. And he brought up another one in that conversation, because I think it transitions well, is think of life as making pancakes. When you make pancakes, that first round of pancakes is never the best ones. It always fails. It doesn't have the right temperature. It's not the right consistency, and you're okay with it, because that first pancake isn't going to go well. You give your guests that second, third pancake that comes out perfect, but that first pancake, that second pancake, be okay with it going bad, and allow yourself to go, hey, I'm going to do this. My first pancake's going to go bad. I'm not giving it to my friends. I'm going to give it to my kids because they're 2 and they're not going to care.
100%. Like I always say, like to my students too, like I am a work in progress. Like going from 1 kid to 2 kids, oh my God, that was a serious learning curve. Going from teaching in the classroom to teaching virtually with a 1-year-old and a 5-year-old kindergarten pod at my house, like it was a steep learning curve, and it was rough. It was so hard. And so I try to be patient with myself. Sometimes not sometimes, I'm always my worst critic. But I always want to be getting better, to be improving. Like, I don't want to be where I'm at now 5 years from now. I want to be better than I am now. And so what you said earlier, Andrew, is huge. You learn more from your mistakes than you learn from your successes. And I wish I could relay that to my students more, for them to understand that, what experience is it's your mistakes and learning from them. And that's all it is, really. And to understand that something that maybe worked for you once might not keep working for you. You have to just keep evolving and keep trying to be your best, and just keep evaluating what's working for you and what's not, and be patient with yourself, and know that nothing is ever going to be necessarily a quick fix.
Yeah, I 100% agree in this on that. Even in, for example, in your class, Mr. Corman, like I remember so clearly on our FRQs on those questions, I would always forget. I in the beginning, I forgot on that one quiz to list out all the equations at the beginning of the question. So I saw every question be like a point off for that, and then a point, and so many points off. But really, it's from those experiences of like really screwing up on those FRQs that now I know how to approach them. Next time around on the AP test, when I see those FRQs, I'll be like, remember to write the equations, because you remember that you remember the setback you faced, and that ability to remember that is really what drives improvement, and drives for me personally on tests, on quizzes, on projects, how I can ensure that I'm improving my grade, not and the grade isn't going down. Because I feel like that's probably at Perfect Program, Mr. Corman, like on for many students you would see it, like the semester starts out well and then it starts to drop off, right? And I feel like for me, how I avoid that is I make sure that I make that mistake. Okay, I made it. Let's just not do that again, And so it's like I'm decreasing the number of mistakes I can make at any given point. That's kind of how I would approach it. Yeah. So, so we talked about challenges. I also want to talk about mistakes. What are some mistakes you often see students making in classrooms that you just wish like, oh, I wish they didn't do that. I wish I could tell them, earlier to like, this is what I would do instead type thing.
I think the thing that I see the most, and I remember kind of being in their shoes, I really don't like to wait until the last minute. And I think that's what I see most students' mistake is at CCA, is they tend to have a lot going on. Everybody has a lot going on. And waiting until the very last minute to, study for a test or to do a project. And that a lot of people will say, oh, well, I just work better under pressure. However, I think it causes a lot of unnecessary anxiety. And I mean, I always just say, like, inch by inch, it's a cinch. Yard by yard, it's pretty darn hard. And if you just chunk it, if you just do a little bit here and there, like I almost don't ever give homework anymore because I try to front load everything in class. And then their homework is, I want you to study these two things. I want you to do this. I want you to review these particular notes, so that they're studying a little bit every single day. Because with a language, you need to, really focus on the little details because you're building a strong foundation. And if you're just waiting and cramming, you're never going to really retain that information. You're going to be great at memorizing. And maybe that's, I feel like I wish students would come to class to learn. And I feel like so many kids are so worried about their grade that it impedes the actual learning process. And I don't know how to fix that, because that's an educational system. That's how our educational system is. And I think if they were to come to class to learn, that effective filter would be lowered so much more and the grade would come. Does that make sense? And I don't know how to tell students, like, I know you want to be a good student, but you got to stop thinking about your grade all the time, because if you're only worried about your grade, the learning isn't going to happen. And
Yeah.
I can remember taking an Excel class at a city college when I first moved out here, because I was working in corporate America and I just wanted to learn more. And I signed up for the class and I did pass fail. And the professor was like, why are you taking this class pass fail? Like, you're my best student. And I was like, no. I do not want the pressure of a grade, because I just want to learn this for my work. And if I have the pressure of a grade, I'm going to be stressed out. And I just want to come to class to learn. And he was like, that's ridiculous. I was like, no, it's not, because that's the way my brain works. And I would not have gotten as much out of that class if I were to have taken it for a grade.
I totally get that. For me, what my mom actually used to say, when I used to play golf, and over COVID, I couldn't do any more because I couldn't, we couldn't leave the house. But when I was playing golf, I used to do really poorly because I would always think about the number of shots I had already taken and how many I had left. And I had to, I had to do this well on the next hole. I think that's how a lot of students, do. Like, I need to get this grade on the next test and then this grade on the next test. You probably hear that so often. And how I personally feel is that she would emphasize to me that you need to focus on on how you're gonna play, not the results. Don't be so focused on the result. That's all you see, and you're losing out on the actual process that's there to go to the result. And that's just something she would often say to me. Just thought I'd add that.
Yeah, I mean, I ditto to both of those. It's focusing on the content. And to kind of build upon what Profe was saying is, I think those students who have actually struggled with ADHD in my class, because I'm dealing with, in physics class, I've got mostly juniors and seniors. So the students who have ADHD have known they've had it for a while. They've been dealing it with for a while. They've gone through a lot of failures and they kind of know what works. And for suddenly a teacher like myself that I'm fairly open of, no, I have it. Like it's not a crutch. We can use this to build upon in the strength. I think those students who use their tools actually end up to be even more successful. And that's because those students have already gone through failures. One of the first things I say in my class is every student struggles in my class. And that's because I think physics, just like a foreign language, it is a foreign language. We're using very big words to describe things that are happening in the daily life. So let's treat it like that. And you're gonna have to struggle at one point to go through it. For a student who has had failures, understands, okay, it's, if I lose a point here, if I forget something here, it's not the end of the world, and I can keep going, and I focus on that content, things will come. That's where I see students' actual struggles end up to be very, very good. It is the student that focuses on, oh, I struggled once and I can't get over that mistake, that then that's where that grade comes in. And unfortunately, as much as we would love to change the educational system, that's well above any of our pay grades. It's not something we can do.
I also think, and I talk to my students a lot about this, and actually parents on back to school night, it's a lot about how you talk to yourself too. I really like to tell students when they say, well, I'm not good at speaking Spanish. I understand, but I'm not good at speaking it. And I'll say, yet. So if you tell me you're not good at something and you can't do it, I believe you, because what you've done is you've told yourself that you're incapable and your neurons have just shut down. But if you say, I am currently working on improving my speaking and I'm getting better every day, then it opens those pathways up for possibility. And I think that, if somebody says like, oh, I'm so stupid. Okay, no, I'm currently challenged with whatever, and I'm learning how to, speak better, or I'm learning how to roll my R's, I'm getting better at it every day. But it's so much about how we talk to ourselves too, and just keeping the possibilities open, and with just saying like, oh, I can't do this. Nope. I don't like the word can't. Put yet on the end. Yet.
There is a great music video off of the Sesame Street sing-along labeled "The Power of Yet." Honestly, it's great. I play it for my daughter all the time and she loves it. We have a whole little dance song with everything, and it's, I can't put my socks on. And I point at her, she's like, yet. I'm like, excellent. But you just doing that just popped it up, and I'm going like, I need to play that in the song, play it in my class for with our egg drop.
I will, you should send that to me. I will forward it along to homeroom committee, because I think that's something that would be so good to have, on some homeroom slides, helping students realize it's about the growth mindset, about like growing. It's not about the now, it's about the journey you're going to take, right? So yeah, if you could send that to me afterwards, that'd be so great. I'd love to be able to forward that on and have more students be able to feel empowered by that. And we talked a lot about students. So, what are some recommendations you would give to parents who have ADHD?
You got this. Keep going. And that's it's weird. One thing I learned very harshly there, how you look at being a parent before you're a parent is totally different. And I can remember I had one parent who came up to me and he goes, "I know you get kids." He's like, I've been a camp counselor, I've been a swim instructor, I've been a coach. He's like, "You get kids, you understand it, you want to see their growth. You're in it all for the right reasons. But when you become a parent, everything you're going to feel is going to be so much greater." And it was really reflecting upon that and accepting that there are some days that I just look at as, okay, my kids made it to bed, they were fed, they're clean-ish. Sometimes we do bad, sometimes we don't, but they're cleanish. And you know what? They know that I love them. And for me, some days I have to accept that as the biggest win. And so it's okay, put my big boy pants back on and figure out how not to make those same mistakes the next day.
Parenting, is it's a lot, and it's been very challenging and very humbling. I think very humbling for me because as well, like before I became a parent, oh my gosh, I was such a judger. I was like, oh my God, that kid, I can't believe they're acting like that. And now I'm like, there's my kid running like a wild banshee through the restaurant, and I'm doing my best, but like it's being a parent's very humbling. And you give all day at work, and then you come home and you switch hats. And I literally, from the time I get home, I can't do anything. Like, Aaron, you saw the picture of my son putting every ball that he had piled up on top of me while I was trying to grade. My husband took a picture, and I'm like, this is my life. This is my reality, and I wouldn't change it for anything. And it's very hard. And I also want my kids to get the best of me, because I give the best of me during the day to my students. And then when I get home, my family deserves the best of me. So I have to very much so compartmentalize. And I think like there's some days, honestly, where I just feel like I'm not doing anything well because I'm just spread so thin and I'm just so tired, and I'm just exhausted. And you, like you said, you get your kids fed, they get a bath, they go to bed, and you're like, whew, wow. Sometimes I just feel like I'm constantly on a treadmill and I'm never able to get off of it. And it's hard, it's exhausting. And I think like I have a little thing on my desk that says, do your best and forget the rest. And that's kind of my mantra in this moment of my life, because I am doing my best in every role. And I do feel spread very thin, very, very thin. And that's very hard because I am somebody who wants to do well in my professional career. I want to be the best mom. I want to be the best wife. I want to be the best friend. I want to be the best daughter, the best sister, the best aunt. And it's just, there's only one of me. And it's really hard. And I find myself saying that to my kids sometimes, like, I'm doing my best. I'm just one person. Like, please be patient. And it's hard. I think my expectations for myself are I put them on myself. All expectations are, I do it to myself, but I want to be the best at everything that I do. And it's hard for me sometimes to feel that I'm not able to really kind of doing everything mediocre. That's how I feel.
And I think, yeah, it's you talk about, we mentioned a word in kind of a pre-chat that I like, of harmony, that it's I've known as a parent with ADHD is nothing's balanced anymore. I can't, it's just doesn't work in harmony, doesn't work. And that's where going back for me, it's going through, I've got my mission statement. I know exactly what it is, what I want to do. I've got, okay, what are my 3 big things I have to do, 3 to 5 big things for that day? Going through and just reminding myself, okay, does it stick with this mission? Am I getting these 3 to 5 things done today? And that's not just in the classroom work, that's 3 to 5 things for everything. What are those most important things? And then it's learning to say no, and that's okay. It's going, okay, what are the big things? What works? What doesn't work? And this is my boundary. I can't. It's stealing Profa's line. It's not a heck yes, so it's a no, and that's hard.
I get that. I mean, I can't say I get it because I'm not a parent, but I also like this be like you said probably about being spread thin, as a student too, like in this day and age, school, extracurriculars, being a son, being a brother, right? All and being a friend, it's really hard to balance all of that. And I get the sense of the juggling, right? It's like at one point you have this on your hands, so you have to toss it up and take this, and you only have two hands, but you have 6 items, right? So how do you have the items in your hand and not drop all of them? And I feel like that's kind of what it really feels like. Um, there's some more specific questions regarding parenting, that the audience has asked beforehand that I'd like to pass on. One of the things that many parents have asked is this. Some parents feel like their attempts to encourage their children with ADHD to learn to regulate themselves aren't going anywhere because their children just don't want to learn. What advice would you give to these parents? Go for it, Mr. Corman.
There we go. I think it goes back to teenagers at that point. They're at that point, they're learning to go off on their own, and not having been a parent of a teenager yet, but having worked with teenagers and really enjoying it. They're at that point in their life that they want to strike out on their own and to try their own things. And unfortunately, as a parent, pushing too hard, they'll push back. And so and usually what I tell my athletes' parents at this time is when they ask, what is the biggest thing I can do, is just be the cheerleader. Just be that support. Show them that you love them. Be that support. When they're excited about something, be excited for them and let them be excited. You've got to trust me and my programs that we'll push them to be better. We'll give them the right tools. We'll be very upfront with what we think it is. And it has to, you kind of have to be that cheerleader to let them learn from the village. And you've got to find the right village for your kids to go through. And I think if you can, because at that point when they're teenagers, they're really learning who they are, and you showing them that you love them, you'll support them, and no matter what, you're going to be there. You got to trust that all the lessons that you've done before, that they're going to do the right thing. And I being a parent of a 5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old, I am getting terrified of that as it is. So that's the best advice I could give.
I would say, well, I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, and my 6-year-old she's struggling really bad at math right now, and I have been trying to help her every single night, and she just gets so frustrated, and so I'm learning how to do Common Core math, which will probably be the death of me. And I have to, I hate to admit it, but like watch 3 to 4 videos about second grade math before I can even help her with her math problems, because you have to show all the work and what have you. But she doesn't want to listen to me. She does not. Nope, she does not. So I just sit there and then I play dumb. So I play dumb. I go, oh, I don't get it. Like, I don't get it. How do you do that? And then she's like, Mommy, well, you just do it like this. And then she starts showing me how to do it. And so kind of just me playing a little bit naive that I don't get it allows her to take more ownership. And also, she wants to do better. And I have to be a good parent in the sense that I try to provide a lot of structure. Dinner time, which I think is really important, because there's a lot of conversations that happen around the dinner table that really are going to be what she remembers later on in life. And same for me growing up. We always had dinner every day at 5:30. We each had a responsibility. We had to set the table or clear the table, load the dishwasher, whatever. Creating those kind of routines and showing them how to be self-sufficient and teaching them, that's the most important thing. And then also, not too much helicopterish, because that's not going to help them. be self-sufficient someday and be able to think for themselves. And that's really hard because I want to tell her what to do so she avoids making mistakes, and she has to make her own mistakes. She has to learn how to do that. And so that's hard, but I really do try to limit technology. She has to earn minutes on her iPad. So if she wants to play Roblox for half an hour, well, she needs to practice her math first. And so it's kind of doing that when her brain is more fresh, like in the morning. Those are little things that you can do to help. Or just ask, is there anything that I can quiz you on? Is there anything that I can help you with? And then if they say, no, I got it. Well, if you think of something that I can help you with, just let me know. I'm here. Just to let them know, like Corman said, that you're there, that you are their cheerleader, and follow up. Oh, how was that math exam? How did it go? I'm excited to hear about it when you're ready to tell me. Maybe they don't want to talk about it on the way home from school. My daughter, she's just tired. I don't say, how was your day? I say, oh, I'm so excited to hear about your day when you're ready to tell me about it. And a lot of times it's like an hour later, oh, mommy, I'm ready to tell you about my day now. And so just little things that I've learned to kind of help her want to share when she's ready to share.
I love that. I don't know. I don't have any further comments. I think that's super helpful for many kids. Building on the kind of this dialogue regarding parents, how would you recommend, parents of kids with ADHD, and maybe just parents in general, how would you recommend parents really work with teachers to help their kids' education?
I think it goes back to, as Profe said, it's not being that helicopter parent, but really encouraging and giving the kids the tools to speak for themselves. And I think that's so much more powerful. When a student comes to me and says, hey, I'm struggling with this, I want to learn more about this, that is a much different conversation than when a parent jumps in and says, my kid's grade isn't the right. And then, because that's an immediately red flag of, oh, okay. So it's the two different conversations that are happening, but that's dealing, you have to judge how old your child is. You have got to judge the situation. And there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle that comes in, but trying to give, especially with teenagers with ADHD, is work on the tools to have those right conversations, because they will hopefully go off into college and be young adults and be very fruitful citizens in the world. They're gonna have to be able to talk to other adults. So high school is a great time to work with that and to really use that.
I couldn't agree with you more. I always want the student to come talk to me, because it's really hard for me to explain to a parent what we do every day in class. Whereas if a student comes to me and says, oh, Prof, I'm really struggling, like I haven't done that great on the last couple tests. Would it be possible for me to come in and go over my tests? Like, absolutely. And that's what I will usually do. If a parent emails me, I will put it back on the student. I'll say, have so-and-so come in and talk to me. We'll go through some strategies. We'll work together. We'll create a plan, and I'll follow up with you with how that meeting went. So I always want the student to be proactive and use their own voice. It's so, so important. And they do need to learn how to talk. They're going to have to speak to their bosses, other coworkers, and it's so important to give them the tools. And I saw somebody ask, like, what are some of those tools? I mean, I have so many different things that I have found work for me, and it's been, like I said, trial and error. I think, Erin, I sent you a bunch of links of things that particularly work for me: exercise, diet, list making, backwards planning. Backwards planning is huge, which is something I learned from another teacher. It's kind of going down another avenue, but backwards planning for students at CCA, what does that look like? Let's say you have 4 classes. So what you would do with backwards planning is, let's say I had English first period, math second period, biology third period, and history fourth period. So backwards planning, and Erin, I sent you the link to that as well that you could share with parents, is what you'd want to do is you want to start with history or last period and do that homework first. Why? Because it's freshest in your brain. Then go to biology because that's your third period class and that's freshest. Then you go to math, which is your second period, and you end up with English, which is your first period. And that's going to be freshest in your brain for the next day because you finished with it and you start with it the next day. So backwards planning, I learned this from our Japanese teacher, Sensei Quinn, and it is phenomenal. It's really smart, and I share it with students all the time. And then it talks about breaks. Incorporate those breaks in there. You have to have something that's going to help you focus for a little time and then move on. I think one of the biggest, most detrimental things to students is thinking that they can be on social media and do homework and listen to music and play video games and text while they're doing their homework. I personally think it's, oh my God, I can't imagine having been a student with all this technology. I would have just been like, what? I would have been so overwhelmed. Like I even when I'm doing my own work, I put my phone away. I have to put it away and I have to focus on one thing. And so, yeah. And I see comments popping up, but I can't really see the whole feed. So Erin, if you want to redirect questions, you can.
I am doing that right now. The question in the chat here, we'll address the chat questions at the end. So if you guys want to put your questions in now, we'll address those at the end of today's talk. Something I really wanted to get touch upon briefly. One parent in particular, and I actually was curious about this too. How do you ensure that students with 504s and IEPs feel comfortable and accepted in your classrooms? How do because many parents are worried about getting their kids a 504 IEP. They want to know how their kids really will experience the actual effects of that in the classroom.
I think one of the benefits of, as a teacher, when you see a student that has a 504 or an IEP, it's right off the bat, I know what works and doesn't work for the child. They've already got something that's advocating for them, where they're struggling, and what they need to be successful. So I would not look at it as a detriment or as something bad that's going to put them down. Which is why, like when I mentioned my mom didn't want me to have that label and my parents didn't want it. There's a social stigma with it, but at the same time, as a teacher, I immediately have something. I have a caseworker that's been working with the student for several years. And so my conversations, I don't have to go through those several weeks of getting to know the student and through all these different failures, because other teachers and other advocates for the student already has done that. So we can work on what's already been done and continue to build that structure even higher and higher.
I mean, for me, I think I really try to set the tone in my classroom right away about how important it is to make mistakes and create an atmosphere where it's everybody's in the same boat and we want everybody supporting each other. And I really feel like that is huge for me as a language teacher, because everybody is speaking a foreign language and everybody's going to have some sense of anxiety around speaking a foreign language. And so it's about creating opportunities for students to have conversations in a non-judging, they're not being tested, but they're speaking, they're talking to each other. They're given different prompts that are allowing them to get to know each other and form friendships and create a sense of community in the classroom. And I think I spend a lot of time with that in the first, month, just creating that sense of, okay, we're all here to support each other. Everybody in some way or is going to feel a little awkward speaking, and that's okay. And if you're making mistakes, that's proof that you're trying. And that's what I want to see as a teacher. I want to see progress, not perfection. And we talk about that so much. And I mean, exactly, when I remember learning Spanish, it was, anytime I was so afraid of speaking publicly, and it was something that I had to work on and I had to break through for myself. There was, I I really was afraid of public speaking. And it wasn't until college that I took a speaking class, and I really had to force myself outside of my comfort zone. And I still have moments where I get extremely anxious and when I have to speak in front of people. And it's just part of life. I mean, you have to figure out how to confront that and what works for you. And everybody's different.
Yeah, I agreed 100%. Even I do a lot of public speaking stuff, and I still, I will still get nervous. So it's definitely a constant, progress, not perfection. I have actually a Mr. Corman specific question. There have been parents asking me about whether or not, their children's ADHD or, autism, whether they're IEPs or school-based supports, do all of these things, do they affect their child's chances for college? Because you used to be an admissions officer, correct? So as many parents have, expressed concern, just what is your personal experience regarding this?
I look at it as it's what those that's something that you're going to have to actually talk to the schools that you're looking at, and also the program that's going through, and what that student wants to learn and what are those accommodations. No longer being behind the desk of it, but when I was, that really wasn't something that I was looking for, nor was it something I was taking into account dealing with students. It was looking as, okay, can this student be successful? And is this the right fit for the college coming in? So what I would do is, honestly, it depends on the severity. But my firm belief is once again, sticking with ADD and ADHD, is it's not a crutch. It doesn't bring you down. For students who have it, you can use it as you have a different way of thinking things that creates you as a more individual, that if you can wrap yourself around in that, you can be even more successful. And so it's finding different pathways that allow you to really work with it. And for me, there are areas of engineering that, man, I could do fantastic stuff. And there's others that it didn't work, which is, and that's just kind of life going in. So it's looking at what they want to do, where they want to go, what can they build their strengths on it. And when you're looking at going into colleges, it's okay, what are your strengths? What are you going to want to be successful in? What's that long-term plan that you want, and how do you get there?
Love that. I think that to the parents who are curious, I think that's your answer there. That's the questions I pre-prepared. So now we're gonna go through some of the audience questions. If you have any more questions, feel free to put those in the chat. We'll be filtering through those, working through those in the last few minutes. Somebody asked, I see adults mostly struggle with time management issues. What about hyperactivity? Do you guys struggle with hyperactivity sometimes?
All the time. Yeah, I have like so much energy, and so you know me, when I'm teaching, I don't sit down. The only time I'd ever sit down is to change an activity. Otherwise, I'm moving throughout the classroom. I'm up and around. And that's one of the best parts about being a teacher for me, is that like sometimes, admin will come into the classroom and I'll be sitting down with students and my back is to them, and they are like, where's the teacher? And I'll be like, oh, over here. I'm like always in with the students. And I think like that also is good for my students to see me up and moving around. And I tell them all the time, like, okay, let's take a 3-minute break. We're going to go outside, get something to drink some water. I constantly tell them, like, it's so important to take little breaks. And then a lot of times I'll see the students on their phones in their break, and I'll be like, get outside, go outside, get some fresh air, change the scenery. But like hyperactivity, I mean, yes, like I'm a total spaz all the time. And I mean, I don't know what else to say, but like, I feel like my energy is, for me, my parents told me like they never wanted to put me on medication or anything, because they didn't want me to, I mean, and medication is for some people, but they personally didn't want me to lose that aspect of myself and kind of being a silly class clown, whatever. That that's a big part of who I am.
What about you, Mr.
And I guess
Corman?
it's about learning, like I was telling you, like learning how to harness that energy.
Yes.
That's been always my thing. It's like learning how to harness that energy. I'm gonna go grab my charger. It looks like my computer's dying.
Sorry, I had to take a brief little moment. My family just got back from the park. Can you repeat the question?
Oh, the question was just, do you personally, there's lots, you talked about time management. Do you personally struggle with hyperactivity as well? And if so, how do you work around with it?
I think my hyperactivity is more of I can get hyper focused. That's always been my thing. It's primarily when I'm on a computer or dealing with electronic devices. I notice that I can get hugely focused and I have to really work around there. And I think for me to have the discipline and the scheduling enough to allow myself to be like, okay, no, I've got 5 minutes to do this task. If I don't complete it in the task, I have to walk away. And then the next part is kind of is allow myself to take the breaks so I can get it. And there are times when being hyper focused for me is extremely beneficial, especially if it's a time crunch and something's big. I can allow myself to go in and I can get a lot done. But at that same time, the time gnomes come where, for me to be on a computer before having kids, get on at 8 p.m. and then suddenly now at 6:30 a.m. That's happened. I've got to have that structure. I've got to have that discipline to follow that structure. And that's really what I focus on.
Love that. And another question that somebody has asked is, I'm paraphrasing this, but how do you recommend, or how do you personally work with students to develop those kind of proactivity skills, being proactive, talking with teachers? How do you encourage students to do that personally?
I often share with them what I do. And I tell them, and you probably heard me say this, Erin, many times, like 10 minutes in class is worth 30 minutes at home. Because 10 minutes in class, you're there, you're focused. Whereas at home, there's a refrigerator, there's music, there's your couch, there's your bed, there's all these distractions. So I always would say to them, like, use your time wisely. 10 minutes here is worth 30 minutes at home. And so I share with them what works for me. I share backwards planning with them. I show them my lists that I make and like how I have to cross things off. And I tell them that I have to get up in the morning and work out. And if I don't, I just feel like I'm in a fog. And I give them little tips along the way and tell them, like, this is what works for me. It might not work for you. And for somebody who is constantly trying to hone in and get better and change, evolve, figure out what I could do better, here are some tried and true things that work for me. And here's what I would recommend. I have a whole list of study strategies, and it goes through and pinpoints exactly how to study, 10 minutes a day for flashcards, just to kind of help you learn your vocabulary and reinforce what you've learned every day. And so, I try to kind of incorporate those tools into my classes.
Yeah, and I think and to add upon that is I really want to emphasize not only just showing them the tools and what works for us and what are some other things that doesn't necessarily work for us. Is I am perfectly fine talking about what doesn't work and what failures I've had of, hey, this just happened. Let's talk about this. Let's try to solve what could be done better. And it's a constant letting them know, students know that, hey, it's an evolving process. This is what works. Here is the structure of whatever it is, whether it's breaking down a problem, whether it's solving a problem, or it's my 4 rules of life, Erin, that we talk about in class quite a bit. But just trying to show them of how structure can help, and how when structure falls apart for me, it falls apart. A lot of things fall apart. I think hopefully maybe there's a few lessons learned.
We have one final question. And this is regarding, the question is specific for kids with autism, but I think it can be applied very generally. There are many group discussions in classes, and many kids, there's a need for them to go up to the teachers and talk to the teachers. How do how would you really recommend kids who have anxiety about like that social interactions work with teachers and perform in a classroom?
I mean, I personally do have social anxiety, and even as an adult, I struggle with it. And I just try to be, I guess from the time I was like in high school, when it got to be the most hindering for me, when it was like, I really just wanted to like kind of go crawl in a hole and bury myself. Um, I think I just thought to myself, okay, this is scary for me. It's probably scary for other people too. And just to kind of try to get outside of myself a little bit more, and just one of my tools is I ask a lot of questions, because I'm interested, and I ask a lot of questions because I don't like talking really about myself. So I ask a lot of questions. And so if you don't know what to say, ask questions, because interested people are interesting people, and you can get beyond your social anxiety if you're focusing, for myself personally, if I'm focusing on somebody else. So that would be my biggest tip, is ask questions. Don't just remain quiet. Put the focus on somebody else, and get to know them, and keep asking questions, and ask whatever you're interested in. Just talk about what's on your mind. Don't just remain silent.
I think the only thing I would add on to that is I see a lot of students who procrastinate, who are not as prepared as they could be, and that increases anxiety because they have a expectation of where they want to be, but yet they know that they are not taking the steps to do that. And for students who are prepared and are preparing very well, they may still have anxiety, but you can remind those students of, hey, look, this is how you've prepared yourself. This is the journey that you have done. These are all the things that you have. You've got the tools, you've got the strength. This is what didn't work. This is what did work. We got here. And that just knowing, okay, I am prepared because I have taken that little bit that I can control and I've controlled it. That can do a lot to decreasing the anxiety. For a student who comes in who has a lot of anxiety about speaking, it's typically because I see a lot of it is they just haven't prepared. They haven't done anything. They spent the last 15 minutes of the previous class trying to put something together. Well, gosh, I would have a lot of anxiety if I had to present that too. And so let's take a moment and let's be prepared. And sometimes that is going back to is you've got to say no to things, because if you've got way too many things on your plate, you can't spend the time on those things that are the most important. And so it's that kind of that harmony that comes in. But for a student who is prepared, and has put that time in, it's very easy to work with that anxiety for them to realize, okay, this anxiety doesn't have to be debilitating.
I agree 100%. Preparation for me, I have to be over prepared at all times. And even in my classes, like I always over plan. So like I feel like my whole class period like flows, and then I have extra if there's never any dead time. So another thing that I learned that helped me a lot in my public speaking class in college is that, you may have heard of it because there was a big thing on TikTok a couple years ago. Whereas if you have, Aaron, do you remember this from my classroom? The warhead candies. If you are very anxious before a test or before speaking, if you have something that's very cold, it works with ice as well, or a warhead that's like really sour, what it does is it distracts your, it causes a distraction. I mean, I don't know how to explain it technically, scientifically, but it essentially causes a distraction to your sensory, your system, and it lowers the anxiety. So before final exams, I hand out warheads to my students. it helps with anxiety. It really does. And so even if it's just sucking on a piece of ice, it's going to distract the person from that. What happens is the salivary glands start going. And if you have something that's doing that artificially, it's going to help you to lower your anxiety. There's so many little tricks that you can do, but the reality is someday you may have to give a presentation at your work, or you may have to have a job interview, and this is the training for it. This school is training for it. So being prepared is probably the best thing you can do if you suffer from anxiety, is prepare, and that will reduce your level of anxiety greatly.
Yeah, I think that warhead trick is extremely doable. Ice cubes, putting it on the wrist as well. It's anything that you can do to get them. I had an athlete, awful anxiety before races. We had a coin, and we had a whole different system of going through of just giving the coin. And it goes back to one of my favorite quotes I love was, "You're in the moment for the moment." Once the moment's passed, that's it. Depression, you're really focusing on the past. Anxiety, you're really hyper focusing on the future. And so if you can get back to just focusing on that moment that you're present in, being present, that can help that anxiety. And whether that's a breathing exercise, whether that's activating the salivary glands, whether that's a temperature or a rubber band snap. But I find being prepared, knowing you're prepared, and getting diet, exercise, good night's sleep. Those are the tools of, okay, let's be success. And the other area that Profe touches on is, and I think I want to really emphasize it, is with these presentations that happen in the classroom, the rest of your class really isn't paying attention to your presentation. They are either so nervous about their own presentation that they can't think about what you're talking about, or they're so relieved that their presentation is done that they're now thinking about something else. So really the only person you're speaking to is the teacher and your group mates. And so that's another thing to just point blank just mention to a student who's got high anxiety is, oh, yeah, that's true. I don't remember what the person said in front of me at all. Yeah.
That kind of concludes our big event today. Before we end, actually, there are a few more housekeeping things I want to quickly go through. I want to talk about, as some of you guys are wondering, what exactly is Students for Attention? Students for Attention is a 501c3 nonprofit that with the purpose of really providing and covering the gaps that currently exist in what kids with ADHD, autism, dyslexia, what they need and what they have. We are all about finding those gaps and covering them ourselves. This is what this whole speaker event is for. You know, we got a lot of people talking about how they wanted to they felt a gap was, information. They wanted to learn more from teachers, from kids like me, from other adults. They wanted to be able to interact with people like us. And so this is that event. So really, please, if you guys want to be more involved with the neurodiversity community, if you want to really help us in our mission to covering these gaps, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I will put my LinkedIn in the chat in just a moment. But I'm so thankful for Mr. Corman and Prof. Crook. Thank you guys so much for all that you do for your students, for me, for CCA. I am just so grateful that, but somehow I ended up in your classes last year and this year. So I am personally just so grateful. Finally, if you could please fill out the survey in the chat. This is the post survey that helps us really gauge how effective this talk was. Furthermore, if you really want the recording, by filling this survey out, you can also get that. Here's my LinkedIn. I'll put that in the chat. We also have one more event in this speaker series. That will be January 14th. Yes, perfect. Actually, the next one. Yes, our next event is called One for All. It's being held by 2 special education teachers in the Chula Vista Elementary School District. They'll be really talking about the connections between the school community, parents, and neurodivergent students. They'll be we put this one last because they're going to synthesize all of the content we've talked about from the one I gave and the one that Prof. Krogh and Mr. Corman have now talked through. It'll really synthesize all that together for you parents and also other teachers to have a very clear picture on just exactly how these different stakeholder groups can work together to make a better world for for neurodivergent students. Once again, please fill out the survey, sign up for our next event, and thank you so much for coming. For people who are interested in having a recording for the first one, I think we can send you the post survey for the previous one. If you just fill it out as if it were a pre-survey, we can definitely get that old one to you. When you register to the event, we also have your email, so we can email that survey to you afterwards.
Aaron, thank you very much for inviting us. Profe, it is always a pleasure to work with you. So, and Aaron, have yourself a wonderful weekend. It's definitely an honor being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Corman.